Welcome to The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky, a weekly podcast that breaks down politics, policy, and current affairs. I'm Becky Scherr.
And I'm Michael Brodkorb.
We are here today with a rare two-guest episode. We will be kicking things off by welcoming Tanner Kerr, Executive Director at MinnPost, to discuss the upcoming MinnPost Festival on September 28th. We will celebrate National Voter Registration Day and early voting celebrating in Minnesota later this week. Then we will hit on the recent plot and foiled attempt to assassinate former President Donald Trump. We will be joined by Jake Loesch, Executive Director of the Citizens League, to help us discuss why it's more important than ever to focus on what unites us rather than what divides us. Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show. So we are excited to welcome Tanner Kerr here to The Breakdown today. Tanner, you reached out a month or two ago inviting The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky to the upcoming MinnPost Festival, and we are so honored and so excited about this event. So we are really excited to hear more about all of the planning that has gone into it and what we can anticipate, because this is obviously more than just our little podcast. It is Saturday, September 28th at the Westminster Presbyterian Church in downtown Minneapolis. Talk to us a little bit about how the event is going to go and what we can expect.
Yes, I will. Thank you for having me. I don't think you should be so humble about not your little show, your big show. We're excited to have you all there as a part of this day. So MinnPost Festival, this is now, I think, our fourth year doing it, but it keeps growing every single year. And it is a festival around people and ideas shaping Minnesota's future, a chance for Minnesotans who, as I put it, this isn't a real swear, Minnesotans who give a damn about the future of our state, coming together and digging into these ideas, hearing the voices and perspectives of Minnesotans and national voices as well, looking out. Obviously, politics is big, media is big, culture is big. But as we do with MinnPost year-round, we try to focus not just sort of on the drama of the moment, but also like what are the stakes, what are the consequences, particularly in a big election year like this. So we're excited to have you both there. I feel like you should talk about what your part of it is going to be, though, since you're the ones who are actually putting it together.
Sure. So we are welcoming John Rouleau and former State Senator Michelle Benson. Both have been guests on our podcast before. And our title of our episode is Turning the Tide, Reviving the Republican Vision in Minnesota. And this is something we talked to you a little bit about kind of on the front end when we were formulating what the show would look like, but something Michael and I have talked a lot about over the years, or over the last 2 years of this podcast. And, we come from a highly partisan background, but don't really feel like the party represents us, nor has the party been largely successful on a statewide scale. So Michael, if you want to maybe hit on a little bit about what we plan to chat about.
I'm really excited about this because, Becky, as you noted, I mean, this is something that's really been kind of the heart and soul of this podcast since we started it, and having the opportunity to do it MinnPost live show in person, it's going to be really exciting. But I think it's important and substantive because, we, even though we're both partisans, we've had a lot of Democrats on this show. We've had a lot of people that I would call independents and centrists, and we've had a lot of Republicans. And one of the things I think we're both big advocates of is a vibrant, at least two-party system. We don't really have that right now. And we have one functioning, I think, political party, and another one that's kind of struggling to find its footing. And so I really hope that we can have a really well-rounded conversation with former Senator Benson and John Rouleau, who are, principled conservatives who want Republicans to win. And I think they have an incredible amount of experience, but then offering some insight as to where the party goes. We've had a lot of discussions with them about messaging. And messaging from our backgrounds, Becky, that seems to be kind of the big rub that we have right now is some of the messaging. And I'm looking forward to having that discussion in person, some Q&A, some questions. And then I also think it's good because I honestly think that most Minnesotans want there to be a vibrant two-party system. I truly do. Even if they're not supportive of Republicans and not supportive of Democrats, I still think that they want a vibrant two-party system. And so I think this type of this podcast opportunity fits right into what MinnPost wants to do, and I'm so excited to be a part of it. I'm so excited to be a part of it.
Well, we're excited to have you there. We're excited for this conversation. I believe I was maybe promised this conversation could get spicy, so people will have to be there to find out how spicy this conversation could be. It's a part of a full. The day starts around noon. It goes into the evening. We've got a full slate, a full schedule. You can check out the full schedule at minnpost.com/festival. Passes are available. They're all access passes, and I think this is pinned on your X profile. There is a special discount code for fans, followers, and haters. We don't want to
discriminate.
Exactly.
Trust me, I'll have a lot of hate. I'll be
breakdown.
there live. You normally advertise where I'm going to be ahead of time, but I'm going to be there. Come.
There we go. Things could get extra spicy then.
Good.
Yes. Using the code breakdown, all one word, code breakdown for 40% off. An all access pass to the festival. We have a lot of other great conversations. We've got the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, is going to be there. He'll be interviewed by CNN's Laura Coates, a St. Paul native who's coming back home for the event. Good conversation with state demographer Susan Brower and head of Explore Minnesota, Lauren Bennett McGinty, talking about the future of Minnesota and the lack of population growth. What will it actually take to get more Minnesotans to move to Minnesota? And I think I may be breaking this news here, but we're announcing Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan's going to be there for a one-on-one conversation with our state government reporter, Peter Callahan. We've got Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry is going to be there talking about downtown and how these effects from downtown emanate across the city and actually across the region and state as well. We got Jake Loesch is going to be there moderating a conversation about dialogue across different college campuses, which I think is not just about college campuses, but about civility, how we come together across the state. So it's a huge day. There's even more in the lineup. You should check it out. We've got David Rohde, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. David Rohde is coming, talking about his new book, Where Tyranny Begins, looking at former President Trump's relationship with the DOJ and the FBI.
Wow.
State, national voices come together. It's going to be a great day, and a way for people to connect. There's a social hour that's going to take place for you to connect with. Again, it's sort of a mixer for people who give a damn. This is your chance that you can find your people here at MinnPost Festival. All the details, minnpost.com/festival. Use that code breakdown, all one word, to unlock a 40% discount on your pass.
And that pass gets you can go see any and all of those speakers that you just listed off, right?
Yes. And you can come and go throughout the day, all at Westminster Church in downtown Minneapolis.
Perfect. I did want to bring up, because I'm sorry, Michael,
no, go ahead.
But because we do have Jake coming on, Citizens League has been a partner with MinnPost on this. Talk to us a little bit about some of the sponsors and partnerships and the great folks that are helping you all put up this on.
Yeah, so we've got a full smorgasbord of sponsor logos that you can see on the site, but a lot of great partners. We're working with Axios. We're working with McKnight Foundation, I should stop naming names because I'm not going to be able to name all of them off the top of my head, and I don't want anybody to feel left out.
All on the website.
Yes, all on the website. But Citizens League is a great promotional partner. It's great to have Jake moderating this conversation. They're actually, Jake and I have been emailing today about they're going to be looking to table in the Commons area and actually engaging people. MinnPost, we have some interactive engagements as well in terms of how people feel about polarization, how they interact with people who are different from them or planning to vote differently than they are. We're going to be talking about this election, and again, not just sort of the horse race of this election, but what do people think the stakes of the election are? What do we think will actually happen afterward, and what it means with a potentially new balance of power here in Minnesota and Washington, and how do people feel about that? So it's a really good opportunity for people to not only connect and hear from interesting people and ideas about our future, but to also share their own ideas, to connect with other people. Our goal with this festival, our goal with MinnPost overall, is to be a trusted guide to what's going on, and that people leave feeling empowered and able to participate and be active participants in shaping our state and national future.
It's great. Thank you again for the opportunity to be there. We're so excited, and we will hope to have you back prior to the festival again to talk about more developments and more news. But we thank you so much for being here today, okay?
Thank you both. And I'll just put one last plug, MinnPost.com/festival, code breakdown, all one word.
Perfect.
For 40% off tickets. So thanks to you both, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you again. Yep. Bye-bye.
So
Becky, that was great.
It's so great. No, I'm so excited. All you.
That's what I didn't do anything.
Oh,
I mean, he invited us. I didn't start MinnPost. It was fantastic to have him on. And I think that was also our first live stream guest.
Yeah, pop on, pop off.
Popping in, popping out. We're trying out new things.
All thanks to you figuring out the tech side. So
yes,
mad props.
Thanks. Where are we next?
We are now, today, September 17th, is National Voter Registration Day.
Are you registered to vote?
I'm registered to vote. I just voted in the primary.
Oh, you did? Congratulations.
I did. Thank you.
That's great.
Yes. Still yet to be determined who I'm voting for in the general, but I have voted it at my home. So if you are unsure if you are registered to vote at your current location with your current information, you can go to minnesotavotes.gov, find out your registration status, or register to vote there.
It's fantastic. I hope everyone registers to vote. Independent on who you're going to vote for, everyone needs to vote.
Absolutely.
Everyone needs to vote.
Absolutely. And I mean, we talk about this all the time, down ballot. It's how many races every year do we hear at the Minnesota legislature are determined by 5, 10, 12 votes. I mean, it really, really does matter. You can also at minnesotavotes.gov, find out who is on your ballot. You can look at a sample ballot, do some research on the candidates in your area, all the way down from school board, city council, state house. If you have county commission races, Congress, and of course the lovely U.S. Senate race that's going on. So, and the top of the ticket. We'll obviously be talking more about this as we go forward. Did want to make one last plug though. This upcoming Friday, September 20th, is the start of early voting in Minnesota. You can vote early without an excuse, in person or via mail. So again, minnesotavotes.gov. Feel like we're channeling our lovely Steve Simon here. You can go there to figure out where you vote in person, to request a ballot, to be mailed to your home so you can vote via mail. It's a great little website. I encourage you to check it out.
Are you we've established that you're a voter. Are you an early voter?
See, I do. I'm a big proponent of early voting. It's something that Republicans are just slowly getting on board with. Democrats have been crushing the early vote game for a long time now. I like voting on election day. There has been times that I've early voted if I was going to be out of town or working on a campaign that just makes it really tough to get to the polls. I not too proud to admit I have cried in a voting booth a time or two because I've been, so exhausted and tired and passionate about the candidate I've worked for, and being able to go and cast a ballot for somebody you work for is just a really great feeling. But I love election day. I love it. It's a rush to me, and man, oh man, am I a nerd, but it is exhilarating and fun. I like to go and thank the folks that are working on election day. It is a very thankless job. If you have the opportunity or have the availability, I highly recommend it, either being an election judge or going and actually working at the polls, because they need poll workers everywhere. Guarantee your area needs a poll worker if you have the ability.
Yes. A couple points I would say. I'm an election. We got a nice comment here. Becky from Shannon Watson. Becky is the best kind of nerd. Of course she is.
I love it.
She's absolutely the best kind of nerd. A couple points I would make, and thanks to Shannon Watson with majority in the middle for that comment, calling you a nerd. That is pretty high praise. I'm a fan of making sure that Minnesotans have every available option to vote. But I like voting on election day just because, and I used to, in the past, I would sometimes vote, I would vote absentee because I was usually busy on election day. But in the last decade plus, or even more, I voted in person because I like to go get an idea as to what's going on at the ballot box. And so voting the day of, I also don't like to vote too early in case there's some development or something. So I'm glad Minnesotans have every option they can to vote early in person, mail in, all that stuff that we have in this state. But my preference is to vote in person on election day because I
I'm
just
with
like to
you.
get some additional information.
I'm with you.
Yep.
We are going to be joined here shortly by Jake Loesch, but in the meantime, I have a couple of things that I think we need to talk about. One, it's football season. We chatted a little bit about it.
Yeah, man.
I bragged a lot last week.
You
It's your
did.
turn.
Again, you can't stop the Michael momentum. I mean, it's fantastic. And by the way, I just came up with that. I did not think about that in advance. I hope it sounds as good outside of my head as it does inside my head. But yeah, I'm tied now. I'm tied for first place in the breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky Pick'em League. I am so excited about that. In that 1 week. How did that 1 week feel?
It felt great. I expect to be on top again. I will take you up tied for first here, but we got a lot of time left.
You have to step up your trash talking because I don't think you got as much mileage out of that 1 week that you were on top that you're going to get. And I hope you don't get a second opportunity. I will just be as vicious as I can this week with the trash talking because I'm dominating in fantasy leagues and I feel great about it. Before you say anything, yes, I know my daughter did beat me yesterday in our family league. I'm frustrated by that, but I'm glad that I have, children are playing in fantasy leagues and they're getting some opportunities to succeed, although it's temporary success. But again, I love fantasy football and I like winning. I like winning
so much, and I'm going to throw myself under the bus here, and I'm surprised you didn't do
Please
it.
do.
I like winning so much that I voted against the Vikings this week. I thought, I want that freaking point. Want the 49ers. I mean, come on. Vikings versus the 49ers.
Becky,
come on. It's a pretty easy point to expect to get my. I know, apparently.
The Vikings haven't lost to the 49ers at home in 30 years.
Okay. Well, I didn't know that stat. That would have been helpful to know a few days ago.
The internet's on the computer.
There were only two people in our breakdown league that selected the Vikings. You and Spencer Creer. The diehards, I would say. I really thought I was going to get that point, and I was ready to make my argument when you were going to call me out and say, like, listen, man, I wanted the point. I want to win the league more than I felt the support for the Vikings. And man, oh man, did that blow up in my face.
Did you pick the Packers too? Just terrible. I mean, I picked the Packers.
I think I got like 7 of the 16 points in our league today or this week.
Yeah,
it was really sad. I mean, to be fair, I think that you got like not. It was a pretty rough week overall.
Not for me.
Wow.
Not for me. And by the way, I was at the Vikings game on Sunday.
Yes, tell us about it. I hear it was a little toasty.
It was miserable. It was so hot at the Vikings game. I was there with my son. We had an absolute blast. And I will say something of note that was interesting. A lot of 49ers fans at the game on Sunday. Probably the most of a visiting team that I've seen aside from a Packers game that I've ever seen. And they were there, obnoxious. They lost. And some of them were kind of owly on the way out, but it was so hot. Oh my gosh, it was such a hot day. So hot. But the Vikings won.
Speaking of, I have to read this meme I saw the other day. It says, September is the best time of year. You can finally turn the AC off and turn the heat on at 7 a.m. Turn that off by 10 a.m. so you can open the window at noon and close those at 2 a.m. so you can turn the AC back on until 9 p.m. And man, oh man, does it just not fit where we are right now. It's so beautiful in the morning and in the evening. And freaking 85. I'm over the heat, man. I'm over it.
It was really rough on Sunday. It was the hottest game I've ever been inside. I mean, of any venue I've been there. I've been there for a Taylor Swift concert. I've been there for other events. It was just gross. It was absolutely gross. And but the Vikings won. You picked, and I mean, the fact that you picked the 49ers is even better. I mean, it just adds a little icing to the cake.
You got a baseball there. Is that a stress ball for you?
I like to hold. I mean, it's just something to hold on to because I just get angry. No, I'm just joking. No, I just something to help me fidget. Yeah. I'm a baseball bat, kind of football, tossing around type stuff a lot during the day. So But yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Now I feel self-conscious.
No, I like it. You would get along great with my son. He does not discriminate. A golf ball, baseball, football, basketball. He can identify them all. Little over 2. Very obsessed. It's pretty adorable.
I can identify him too.
Yeah. Oh, that is great.
Yes, I can identify him too.
Very, very proud of you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yes. So grateful. So as we get into fall here, you still feel good about all of your leagues? Your fantasy league's
Yes, I
take
feel
you
good about all my
forward?
leagues. Well, first of all, I'm in first place in our league. I'm tied in the other league that I play with at home. I'm in a great spot. I'm in the driver's seat. Plus, I'm the commissioner I have managerial in the families.
So that mean you cheat?
No, I just have oversight in both leagues to make sure that it's fair. I'm just about making sure that people are having fun times, whether it's providing you an opportunity to make a terrible pick or having an opportunity for my daughter to knock me off at a game. I will say that that's fun. I want to add just one more note on something that occurred yesterday. And I'm just thinking about this now. I was going to tweet this up, but I forgot to do it yesterday. Do you know what happened yesterday?
No, I don't know what you're referring. I don't know. Nothing stands out to me.
I passed the Brimley Cocoon line yesterday. You know what the Brimley Cocoon line is?
I do not.
Do you know who Wilford Brimley is? Okay, boy. So Wilford Brimley is an actor. You've seen him before. Ralston, I mean, he did like oatmeal commercials, big beard. He was this actor that played in the movie Cocoon, and it came out in like 85, 86. And he looks super old in the movie. And what people have figured out, yes, Shannon Watson is great. He also did diabetes commercials. He did. And so he was on Seinfeld. He was in The Firm. He played a real goon. So the Brimley Cocoon line is figuring out how old, because in the movie, Wilford Brimley plays someone who's a senior citizen I don't want to ruin the movie, but there's, these aliens come down and he's in Cocoon. In reality, Wilford Brimley was only 50 years old, 9 months and some days. So a couple years ago, I figured out from spending too much time on social media that there is something called the Brimley Cocoon line. And what it does is it puts out it's a Twitter account, Brimley Cocoon line. So a couple of years ago, I put it in my calendar and I passed the Brimley Cocoon line yesterday. And I feel great. And so last night when I said it, my kids were looking at pictures of Wilford Brimley and they're like, Dad, you look way younger than Wilford Brimley. So just want to point it out. I'll be sharing it later, but it was a big day in my life.
I'm very pleased for you. That seems like a really big accomplishment that you've been.
And you don't know that I made it that far to live. Yes. And you don't know who Wilford Brimley is?
I mean, I just looked him up. He does look familiar.
Yes. Looks familiar. Yeah. So I'll send you the link. You can tack in the time many years from now. I'm not going to play and engage in any bit of ageism, have any type of HR violations here. But I venture to say you're probably not turning 50 for more than a decade.
Just over. Yeah.
That's fantastic, man. Well, we'll hopefully still be here in some form.
Hey, wouldn't that be a feat?
That's right. Exactly.
While we're waiting for Jake, you just jump in and with him whenever he jumps on here. We still got a couple minutes before he is joining us. I just want to follow up on a little bit of news that came from last week. So we obviously broke down the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And we're speculating whether there was going to be a second one. So it would technically be Donald Trump's third presidential debate of this season, the second rematch between the two of them. And Donald Trump said no. And you have some thoughts on that.
I think it's ridiculous. First of all, he's absolutely skipping debates. He's absolutely chickening out a debate. As someone who's wore a chicken suit before, and this is something I can be an expert on, he's absolutely skipping debates. And I think it's sad.
But he did the two. That he agreed to.
But he only did one with Kamala Harris, the vice president of the United States, the nominee. And I think that's sad. It's disappointing. I will say to you, I'm a big believer in any type of event that where there can be some sense of a semblance of democracy, where two sides are fighting. I have said before, and I've articulated this to you before, Becky, that I think campaigns can be as you know, what they frequently say is that state legislatures are laboratories of democracies. I think campaigns can be too. I think they can be great opportunities for people to have a vigorous back and forth in debates. And I think debates can do that. And it's just sad that that's not going to happen again this election cycle. And so I'm disappointed in it. I'm disappointed because I'm really excited that Jake is going to be on, because one of the things I think we're trying to do is really try to appeal as Lincoln spoke of, appealing to our better angels and people out there and talking. And it's really dovetail into our conversation soon with Jake, because I think any opportunity that happens for people to sit across the table as Democrats and Republicans and watch a joint event and people leave that stage together is great. I'll also say to you something, that since we've watched all the presidential debates, vice presidential debates, partisan debates on each side over the last 4 or 5 years. And to raise my kids' civic IQ and their civic awareness. And it's just disappointing. And Becky, I'll have to say, I think it really dovetails into what you do with the Citizen League and what our next guest talks about at the Citizen League, is just finding opportunities for people to come together. And as I now have had that super partisan, hyper partisan background, but now as I've gotten older in the last few years and now past the Brimley Cocoon line, I cannot begin to tell you how excited I am for opportunities for people just to be partisan, but to be partisan together and to throw the elbows, but not actually throw the elbows. And so I'm just a little disappointed about it.
And I don't disagree. I like the debates. I like the opportunities for candidates
You're a nerd.
to share. Of course. Trump's statement that I read, not official statement, but a comment, I think in an interview or to a reporter, was, he says only losers seek a rematch and he doesn't need one. One thing I would encourage, because, while we did get another sit-down interview with Kamala Harris, I think there is always the opportunity for her to share more, because she has not had the platform for the length of time that former President Donald Trump has. I am a big proponent of, if there is an ask or an invite for a debate and one candidate says no and one says yes, give it to the one who says yes. Give it to the one who wants to. If she wants an hour long on NBC or Fox News to talk about her policy positions, not in a combative, it doesn't need to be, I don't mean that, it needs to go up and somebody else needs to play the role of the aggressor or anything of that sort. But I think this at the legislative level. I've done this with when I've worked for congressional candidates. Go get your time. Just because your opponent doesn't want to have that time, go get that time. And I am a big proponent of that. I hope she does continue to do interviews, get out there, along with Governor Walz, who I've liked some of the little barbs from Rochelle Olson in the Morning Hot Dish lately about Walz not taking questions these days. But that's a story for another day.
That's right. Jake is here. Should we bring him in?
Let's bring him in.
See if I can do this. There he is, just like that.
Welcome.
Hey.
Hello. So Jake, welcome to the Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky. We are really excited to have you here. As a quick throwback, I have to, of course, mention that doing the math was a little scary, but about 13 years ago, the three of us were all working at the Minnesota Senate together, which is wild that it's been 13 years. Pretty crazy. But Jake, so you're now executive director over at the Citizens League. You've had an incredible resume working for issue campaigns, organizations, MnDOT, serving on the board of Citizens League before now becoming the executive director. And I've had the privilege of, for the last 9-10 months here, being on the board of directors. So it's been really exciting to watch you work and to be a part of this organization. And we're here to chat a little bit with you about a kind of tough topic, but kind of dovetailing off a tough topic. So when Michael and I were chatting about how we wanted to kind of address this, you were the perfect guest that in mind for both of us. As we all know, over the weekend, there was an individual who laid in wait, targeting former President Donald Trump during his round of golf. Thankfully, he was discovered, arrested, plans were interrupted. But this is the second time in the last couple of months that we have had somebody taking aim at the former president's life. So Michael and I spent a lot of time after the first assassination attempt and have had many conversations over the last few years about the need to turn down the temperature and the rhetoric in partisan politics. And as somebody who's been in and out of politics over the last decade or so yourself, you understand the high stressed, high tension world that this all is. So I want to start by simply asking, are you surprised of where we've gotten and that this is what's occurring in this day and age of politics?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, first, thank you both for the invite to join you today. It's a thrill to be here with you, and I really appreciate the chance to talk about it. I guess the answer to your question simply is no. I'm not terribly surprised that this is where we've gotten, because I mean, first, let's be clear. Political violence in any way, shape, or form is abhorrent, and it should be condemned in every way. The Capitol attacks on January 6th were political violence. Assassination attempts are political violence, and they're all wrong. And we need to do everything that we can to fight them. But the reality is we have to ask ourselves why we got here and how we got here. And, it's not like we just suddenly woke up in some angry, divisive, violent America, right? There are reasons that we've allowed it to get this way. And I think, unfortunately, we now have the burden or the responsibility, depending on how you look at it, collectively to figure out how to dig ourselves out of this hole. Because where do we go from here? I mean, the state of political discourse in this country is pretty sad, to be honest. And I think we find ourselves in a time period where even things like talking about civility or having a conversation with somebody who disagrees with you is viewed as a dirty word. That's a really tough spot to be, especially sitting at an organization where we try really hard to increase civic engagement and provide people the opportunities to do just that, to hear from people who have a different perspective than them. But we live in political bubbles these days, and it's uncommon for people to actually take the time and the intention to seek out a different perspective.
We spoke with Tanner Curl at MinnPost earlier in the episode, and he was mentioning some of the work you guys are doing with the MinnPost Festival, but talked a little bit about a table we're just emailing about this table and kind of having some conversations about just that. So talk to us a little bit about your work at the League and how you have kind of transitioned from partisan politics to wanting to cultivate these civil conversations, even with people you disagree with.
Yeah, well, I mean, I got my start in Republican politics, right? At one point in my life, I thought that was going to be my career track, and I was going to be a partisan Republican hack, just like many of us have done a stint in that partisan politics, and thought that's where we might want to be. I worked for the Republican Party. I was in 2010. I spent a lot of time running around the state, pounding lawn signs and walking in parades, and then, like you mentioned, Becky worked at the Senate in 2011 as a legislative assistant. And, I think pretty clearly I started to realize that my own personal politics maybe weren't as far right, or not even far right, just maybe not as much in line with any political party as I personally thought. I left the legislature then to go work on the Vote No campaign on the marriage amendment, which my boss at the time had voted in favor of putting on the ballot, and I went to work against it. But that campaign really was, for me personally, a turning point. I think we built a really intentional and purposeful campaign that we knew we had 18 months to defeat an amendment, and no state before had ever accomplished that, had ever done that. We also benefited from the time and new research and how we talked about the issue. But I think that was a really significant part of that campaign, and something that I've taken with me throughout every job that I've had. You have to meet people where they are, and you have to show interest. You're never going to change a person's mind or even be able to engage in a real conversation if you start out with shame or attacks or aggression or anger, or how can you be so stupid to think that way, right? To ask honest questions. You have to really, truly put the time in and the effort to have a conversation with somebody and understand, look, we all have our own lived experiences that have shaped who we are and why we believe what we believe. And the idea that somebody has a different belief than you just because they have a different life, that's not inherently wrong or bad in any way. But it is our responsibility to actually take the time and ask honest questions to understand another person's point of view. I did some lobbying. I worked in PR. I most recently was the communications and public engagement director for MnDOT, the State Department of Transportation, before starting at the League. And all of those jobs are very different, but I think a common thread is that I had to work with people who had different political beliefs. I had to work with people who had different backgrounds and different ideas about how to be successful. And I had to figure out how to move forward, how to find solutions, how to pass bills with bipartisan authors, how to work, at a state agency with 5,000 people. Sure, it may be in a Democratic administration, but that doesn't mean that everybody who works there has the same political beliefs. And how do we still move forward and get work done? That to me is the core of what we should be focusing on. And it's what I think the Citizens League we've been around for 72 years, more than 72 years now. And that's always been core to our work, nonpartisan, fact-based civil discussion, where we have opportunities for people to hear from different perspectives and different sides and shape their own opinions. But a big part of civic engagement, a big part of being an active citizen in the United States, I think, is taking the time to learn and listen. And unfortunately, that's just, it's non-existent in a lot of political conversations today, where everything is a war mentality, us versus them. We must win, they must lose at all costs. And when we have that type of political rhetoric and we just keep in that downward spiral, it's really no surprise that we've ended up in this spot. And it's really sad. It's really disappointing. And I honestly, I have days where it's really hard to do this work, because it's like, well, does anybody actually care? Right? Does anybody want to find any common ground? Does anybody want to work together? And I fundamentally believe people do. And you see it all over the place. There are organizations and people and elected officials doing really great work trying to make that happen. But it's an uphill battle when political parties and candidates and elected officials continue to spur out more and more divisive rhetoric and attacks on the other side just to try and score points or win an election.
Absolutely. And by the way, I just have to say, I'm so impressed with what you're doing, what both of you are doing. But Jake, as a guest, it's so critically important. And when Becky and
Michael, I appreciate that.
When we heard the news of what happened again, Becky and I, and she suggested you, and it was like just perfect. I mean, it was absolutely what I think is needed, because I think particularly, I don't want to speak for Becky, but my perspective is that, having done this podcast for the last couple of years and almost 2 years now, one of the things that we have to do when we're doing a podcast is we have to pause and we have to listen. We have headsets on, and I have to tell you, having to listen and pause and listen to the other side and have a discussion is a very important exercise. And I'm so thankful that I had this opportunity with Becky over the last couple of years, because it has really rewired my thinking in terms of particularly just about discussions. And it's very difficult for me to now not be in an environment where people don't listen, because so much of what Becky and I have to do on this podcast is listen to people and have discussions, because we want people to come on and talk, even if we disagree on political issues, on food takes, on football or other stuff. We're having people on, and it's difficult to listen to Becky sometimes talk about her football and her food takes, but it's important to listen. What I would say to you is, so I just want to say to you both, I really admire what you both are doing in different capacities with the Citizen League, because I think it's more important than ever. And I'm so excited to have you on and to promote, Jake, what you do, and Becky, what you do on the board, because I think it's so important that people know that and know that it exists. I have a question for you about, and it's a question I kind of go to, but I want to get your take. Start with you, Jake, but Becky, do social media. Social media is really, I've become more and more of someone who believes that kind of tunnel vision, that social media connects us, but it allows people to silo conversations. Do you think, aside from the introduction of certain partisans in the last few years, in the last decade or so, what role do you think social media has had? And if you think it's had a role, and any suggestions on what people could do to have a better communication and relationship with social media?
It's a double-edged sword for sure. Social media is great in so many ways. It's made us more connected. It's made it easier to find information. It's put things at our fingertips in ways that we never knew before. But when I think about it, and I, even just my own usage of social media, where, thank God it wasn't really that prevalent when I was in college, because I would regret and probably have to delete a lot of things. We all grow up, right? Yeah. But actually, I looked at some numbers on this. We had an event just last week with the Center for Rural Policy and Development, where we talked about youth mental health, and social media came up in that conversation as well. But the reality is, the statistics are something that are important here. 70% of adult social media users in the United States generally say that they don't, or rarely, if ever, comment on political or social issues. So when we think about it in that sort of echo chamber that becomes social media, and when we naturally all, in social media, you choose who you follow, right? Like you make a political bubble around yourself of people you follow and who you pay attention to. So you know what? You often end up seeing only things from the most extreme viewpoints on either side. The people who are actively talking and commenting about politics on, the very online people, right, who have opinions about everything, and their first reaction is to post something bombastic or whatever online for clicks and rage bait. It's a problem. And I think the reality is, it's not just the existence of social media, right? Social media platforms have a responsibility, but I also am a firm believer in free speech, right? I will fight for your right to say whatever you want to say, even if I find it abhorrent. I also think that people sometimes forget that free speech that doesn't mean that there are not consequences to your speech, right? You can say whatever the heck you want. You also need to be prepared to accept the consequences of those. At the same time, though, I think like one of the hard parts about social media for me is it then often drives our media cycle. So it's not just whether you're on the platforms or not, but how often it's not uncommon to see a news story or a headline talk about what some person on the internet said, what some crazy tweet said, or what some commentary was that then drives the news that we're consuming. So whether or not you use social media, you're sort of stuck with it. I think that there's, it comes back to the same idea of you have to make a decision that you're going to burst your own political bubble in a way, right? You're going to seek out news sources and people who are talking about things in a different way than you. You're going to fight the urge to not follow or not comment on something and actually read or listen or click through to the actual link. Don't just read the 240 character tweet about it. Read the story, right? But unfortunately, that's a lot of responsibility that sometimes people don't have the time or the energy to do. You think about it, like 15 years ago, even, you really couldn't find out that much about people, right? You'd have to talk to somebody to understand what they thought, how they felt about an issue, where they fell on the political spectrum. Today, I can spend about 5 minutes and Google you around and find out every single thing I want to know about you and decide whether or not I want to even talk to you. That's a shame, right? And people do it. We all do it. You meet somebody new. One of the first things you do probably is Google their name, look for their job. Where do they work? What have they said about things? And we already take preconceived notions about people or organizations before we even have a chance to talk to them. And that's, I think, one of the hardest parts for me about social media and the internet. It's a great tool, but it can easily become a real challenge and a hindrance to any sort of real debate or dialogue.
And one point I just want to quickly make on that is I was at the Vikings game on Sunday, came out of the Vikings game and just felt and that was the news had just come out then of what had happened to former President Trump. And one of the things that I think is the worst is crisis or tragedy social media, because I think there's people making accusations. There's people that want to pile on. And I'm sorry, as someone who is not supporting Trump this election cycle, I certainly don't want any harm to happen to him. But I also don't want to go out and add to the fire right away. And there just seems to be this connectivity. I can't stress enough to people how much important it is to talk to people and how much it is for people to have face-to-face, non-social media conversations.
And we don't want to talk to people because we don't trust each other anymore. I mean, I think that to me, when I think a lot about the work and where the Citizens League is and the work that we're trying to do and what our organization has stood for over the last 7 decades, so much of it is based in basic trust. And there was a study done last summer, I want to say, that really got into it. It was run with the University of Chicago and an organization called Starts With Us that I would encourage you look for and follow the work that they're doing. But one of the things that they showed in that study was Americans still tend to agree on a lot of really core values, right? Regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum. And this isn't news. We've heard this before. Yep. But what's different is that we no longer trust the other side shares those values. So if we're starting to talk about a conversation or engage with somebody and we're not even believing or trusting that they have good intentions, they have the same passion and love for country and desire to have safe communities and safe schools and good jobs available, all of these core things that unite us in many ways, they're there, but we choose to focus on, the 20% that we disagree versus the 75 or 80% where we might have similarities. And don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a quote that I love, and I actually wrote it down because I wanted to make sure that I got it right. A country born by breaking with a king inherits dissent as a birthright, right? Like this is dissent, debate, passion for our beliefs. This is something that's always been core to the DNA of this country, and we should encourage it. Thoughtful debate, passionate defense of your beliefs and your opinions. That's good. I want to encourage that, and we talk about that a lot with the Citizens League. When we talk about finding common ground or working together or multi-partisan approaches to work, that doesn't mean come to the mushy middle and give up everything you believe. It actually means the opposite. Bring your
Yeah.
strongly held beliefs. Tell us about them. Why do you believe that? And where did you come? How did you come to that perspective? What about your life shaped that for you?
God, yes.
All I ask is that you also understand and come into that conversation understanding the other person or the other people in the room have the exact same thing. They feel the same passion. They feel the same deep, strongly held beliefs. Why? Ask questions. Be curious. Curiosity to me is a huge part of our civic responsibility and our civic duty. And there's not enough of it because it's easy enough to just talk to people who think like us and shame everybody else. How could you possibly think or believe that? Well, if you're doing that, you're going to probably continue to lose elections because 50% of the population does feel differently than you, probably more.
Damn it, you're right.
Michael, we just talked about this a couple weeks ago, brought up an episode of Ted Lasso where he talked and encouraged folks to be curious. And I think that is something that we've lost a lot. And so many thoughts running through my mind right now, but I did want to applaud because I think that we can look back to that Vote No, the support of gay marriage campaign that you were on with so much. I mean, it should be studied time and time again, because I think in particular, the way having conversations around those social issues too, I think is something that is incredibly lacking. I mean, we don't have conversations about tax policy or education policy, but when it comes to things like that, where it's real people's everyday life and who they are, and some folks basically saying that they don't exist and the way of life is non-existent. We had the pleasure of having Lee Finke on and talking with her about some of her legislation and having that conversation as well. I just think the way that campaign was run and having those conversations and highlighting the parents and the sisters and the teachers and the loved ones in these lives was so compelling, and something that we talk a lot about that is missing from politics, in particular on the Republican side, is the storytelling and really kind of bringing that humanity back to our politics and our policies, because it's so easy to look at facts and figures and stats and studies and all of that. And that has a time and a place to be at the forefront of our conversations. But when we forget about the people who are impacted, when we forget about the people whose jobs are made more difficult, their parenting is made more difficult, their inability to provide for themselves or their families, whatever their family might look like. I mean, it's just, we lose that humanity and we just come from such a place of hatred. And it's so frustrating and tough, and really then perpetuates what we see on the social media of that hate. Like you said, the echo chamber, right? I mean, if you want to lean in and ignore all of the opposing viewpoints, it's so easy to do that. And I'm sure we all have friends or family members in our social feed who just retweet, reshare, post, all of those kind of things. And you just want to shake them and say, like, let's sit down and have a conversation. Because even if I'm not going to change your mind, just like bringing a different viewpoint. I mean, it has been such a privilege for us to have these conversations over the last 2 years. Not that my policies have changed at all, but just how much more I've learned about things. And I think it's funny to me that I feel like the conversations we have with even some of the hyper partisans, the folks who have lived and died for the last decade or two in partisan politics, they get it. They get the conversation side of things that are needed sometimes. And it's just those people on the periphery who kind of miss that. And it is something I hope to bring back, and brings me to my next question, because I want to bring it back to the Citizens League one more time.
Sure.
Citizens League mission statement is empowering people to engage in civic life and public policy to make Minnesota a better place to live and work for everyone. So in your experience and in your work now, let's give folks a little bit of something to take away of maybe how they can bring this into their day-to-day life, how they can lean away from what divides us, lean into what unites us, and try to make things just a little bit better, and bring down that you can still be for your candidate or for your policy or for your party, but in a way that helps us all move forward and hopefully changes things, whether it's in 5, 10 years or 20. We got to end this cycle.
Well, we have to keep trying, right? We can't give up. I've gone through ups and downs about how I feel about politics and whether I want to even continue work in this space, because sometimes it's really damn depressing, to be honest with you. But we can't give up. That's not who we are. That's not who I think people of Minnesota or the United States are. We care about this place and we want to make it better. I think at the Citizens League, we try really hard to model that, Becky. I think that's one thing that we've always upheld as a value. So in all of our, we've been, over the last year since I've started in the job, we've been trying to do a lot more public events. We have one this evening for anyone who's listening and wants to come learn more about paid leave. Join us at Bad Weather Brewery in St. Paul. I'll do a little pitch there starting at 4:00. But we really, I think, see our role not as necessarily, coming up with some brand new tool for conversation, right? There are dozens of organizations and good electeds and people who are trying to do this work, and we want to amplify that. We share it. We put that content out there and make sure that people see it. But we take it into our events and our conversations. So whether it's a policy project that we're doing, we just launched a new one exploring public service and how we can support and strengthen folks working in public service and those career opportunities with the League of Minnesota Cities and the Association of Minnesota Counties. So through those conversations, through our public events, intentionally seeking out people who have different perspectives and modeling the kind of behavior we want people to take out into their day-to-day lives. I think at the end of the day, though, there's no organization that's going to be able to do this for you. It's a responsibility that we have to take on as individuals, that we're going to say, I'm sick and tired of this. This type of dialogue and discourse isn't getting us anywhere. There's a better way to do it. And I'm going to take on the responsibility of seeking out a different news source, reading an author I might not have seen before, listening to a podcast I might not agree with, right? Meeting with a legislator, whether I support them or not. I mean, there are so many easy things that you can come up with. But at the end of the day, I put a lot of it on each one of us as individuals to take the responsibility to say, I'm tired of this and we don't have to do it anymore. Politics doesn't have to be this ugly, vitriolic place. I mean, there's always going to be passionate defense of beliefs and debate and dialogue. That's what makes us strong. I think one of the hard parts for me over my own career is, as someone who felt like I used to have a political home in a political party, I don't anymore, because neither one really reflects my own beliefs. And that's, a good 2/3 of the population generally over the years polled say that neither party fully represents them anymore. Don't get me started. I could do a whole nother podcast on the binary political system and where I think that's led us. But I mean, ultimately, it doesn't have to be a party. It doesn't have to be an organization. It doesn't have to be something you align yourself with. It's a task that we all choose to take on because we believe we can do this better, and we're going to do our own little part to make it happen.
I could sit and listen to you guys talk about this for days because I think it's so important. And I have to say,
let's do it again.
Yes, of course we will. And I have to say to both of you that it's so important. And I'm even hesitant to speak up because I want to make sure you get all the time both you guys can to talk about stuff. It's so important. And I just will have to say to you both, it is so important what you're both doing. And Jake, in your efforts leading it and doing the things, it's so important. I guess, again, I'll throw it back to you, Jake, and Becky, too, if you want to chime in. What tools and resources do you have or suggestions you have for people to have conversations about politics or about issues from the standpoint that people can, those can be safe conversations? I have found, as someone who's kind of stepped back into doing something more partisan for the duration of this election, I have found situations where it's really challenging to have some conversations when you're approaching it from a different perspective. What tools and resources or approaches, best strategies do you guys do in your lives when you're having conversations on issues or partisan politics that you can maybe give to our listeners as how to approach them in thoughtful ways?
It's a great question. And I don't know that there's any, silver bullet to that solution, because it's going to depend on each individual person and who you might be talking to. Becky, I don't want to necessarily cut you off if you were about to say something, but I would start with, as I mentioned before, there are a number of organizations, both nationally and locally, that are doing work in this space and have a lot of resources and ideas. One thing that I really was following closely and really appreciated was Governor Spencer Cox of Utah. When he was chair of the National Governors Association, they had an initiative called Disagree Better, which I really loved because it really got to the core of this conversation that I feel is so important, which is disagreement isn't bad. It's just that we need to do it better, right? Because we disagree does not mean we're mortal enemies. Me and you disagreeing is human nature. It is a very, very basic experience that we all have. But we've turned it into a thing where if you disagree with me, you are my enemy. Right. That is often the quick jump we make as individuals, as political parties, whatever it might be in discourse today. And so I think some of it is fighting our own instincts, our own urges, right? Where we're like, oh, you disagree with me. We're never going to see eye to eye. I don't want to talk to you anymore. You're not on my team, right? We are on the same team. Yeah, sure. There's different factions. There's different, it doesn't, we're on the same team. We're Minnesotans, we're Americans, whatever community you might want to talk about. We're on the same team, and we're all trying to make the best place to live that we can be. I think some of the resources that I really other organizations, Braver Angels does a lot of trainings. Bridge USA is a youth-led kind of movement trying to work on political partisanship closer to home. The Center for Common Good at the University of St. Thomas, the Humphrey School at the U of M has a lot of programming on this. So much of it is just actually stopping and I would say, when I get into those types of conversations, intense conversations, somebody I disagree with, somebody I'm really having a hard time understanding how they're feeling, what they're feeling, I just try and stop myself, right? Like I'm going to be wanting to tell you all the reasons that you're wrong or all the things that I think that are different. And that isn't always the right thing to do, right? It's not always the right time or place for that. Ask a question. Just keep asking questions, because most of the time people are really interested in talking about themselves, right? That is, we all like to do that. We talk about ourselves. That was, and this was one of the things that Becky, you were talking a little bit about Minnesotans United. And if I have a minute, I'll just go back to that. That was core to our campaign, right? Was pairing people up with a shared identity. So we had phone banks where Catholics talked to Catholics and Republicans talked to Republicans because they could understand each other's experiences better, right? If you're a progressive Democrat who's grown up in South Minneapolis and you that's the life you've lived, talking to a conservative Republican in greater Minnesota, there's not going to be an enormous amount in common. I'm not saying you can't talk to each other, but it might be a lot more difficult to understand each other. And that conversation is going to take longer. It should happen. Don't get me wrong. I love those types of conversations. But when you can relate to somebody and you can find a common thread, it's so much easier to have that conversation. I sat on the phone with people in that campaign, and you started out by asking a question like, why did you get married? And I would sit on the phone with people for 20, 30 minutes talking about marriage. We didn't even start talking about the amendment or whether they should vote no, but like strangers talking to me, a stranger, about their marriage, some of the most personal things in a person's life. People are willing to talk about themselves if they believe that you genuinely are curious and want to know. But it's also it's pretty easy to tell whether a person you're talking to is genuinely curious about what you believe and what you think, or if they're just there to tell you that you're wrong. And I think holding ourselves accountable to that genuine curiosity in our conversations is what's missing from most of these discussions today.
And I completely agree. And I think it goes back to your earlier comment of meeting people where they are, because I think there are ways to also have those conversations, and that will help encourage conversations down the line, right?
Yeah.
To have the conversations and to ask the questions. So when you meet somebody similar in a few months, you're better able to have that conversation and asking the questions of how'd you get there? Why do you believe? And so many different things too.
Yeah.
I feel like so many people don't truly understand why they believe what they believe. And so it gives them some introspection of like, maybe it's not maybe going to change their mind in any way, but it forces them to go home and think a little bit more of like, maybe this is a short-sighted thing. And maybe this is something that was just ingrained in me from, X, Y, and Z teacher or parent or whoever that might be. And again, any conversation that you can have that leaves you or the other person a little bit more curious to learn more, read more. I had my favorite teacher in high school, I will say, is probably absolute flaming liberal. I believe it's actually her birthday today too. I'm friends with her on Facebook still. But it was during the height of Bush going overseas and looking for weapons of mass destruction. But was he really? Did we trust him? It was all of this stuff going on, and so much of what we hear is teachers just ingrained trying to impose all of their views. And she constantly said, read everything you can get your hands on, listen to everything you can, watch everything that you can, and form your own opinions. And it really ingrained in me a desire to do that and to learn more and to figure out what I believed and why I believed that. And just those conversations. I have the lovely opportunity to have some far, far, far left friends in my life and far, far, far right. Even in my wedding party, they could not have been a bigger, wider a political spectrum. But we've had the conversations and we've understood that it's okay and we're all still human and good people, even though we have different core beliefs in a variety of ways. So this was really exciting. I certainly want you to come back because we love having these conversations. I mean, you're the two parties, the two-party system and the need for that. That's actually our conversation at the MinnPost Festival. So we're really excited about that.
Great.
But also kind of our viewpoints personally of being a little politically homeless ourselves and not really identifying with the party that we spent so much time and energy supporting and working in. So more conversations. Thank you so much. This was incredible.
Thank you. I really appreciate the chance to talk and join you today. It was great. Understanding is a two-way street. I think it was an Eleanor Roosevelt quote, and it means it's a very simple way to put it, right? You can't expect to understand another person's point of view, and you can't expect them to understand yours if you're not both willing to put in that effort.
You both, this has been just remarkable. And I want to thank you, Jake, for coming on today. And Becky, Jake, for your leadership. Becky, also for yours with the Citizen League. And I will also say, it was so important to do something that kind of reset my thinking on what's occurred in the last few days. And Jake, you couldn't have been a better person to help kind of frame that discussion up. It is so important what you both are doing in different capacities. It's so important. And I couldn't be prouder of seeing the work that you guys are doing, and whatever we can do, whatever I can do to help promote the Citizen League and more civility in finding what binds us, please don't hesitate to let me know. I want to thank our viewers and listeners for another episode of The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky. Before you go, show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or the podcast where you listen. The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky will be back soon. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye.